There we go.
We're on. All right, we're at 6:30. We'll call our committee of the whole meeting to order, and I'd like to welcome our engineering department with our what's going to be our annual sidewalk presentation. So the floor is yours, Ms. Connors.
So we were here back in October of 2019 to have a very similar discussion, and we talked a little bit about we went through the 1999 Sidewalk Master Plan, went through some of the goals, went through discussions about important connections, talked about funding sources, really had a good fundamental sidewalk talk, and I think we all left that room that night very well intended that this was going to be the year we were going to start doing some sidewalk, and then along came COVID-19 and kind of changed everything. So I feel like we're kind of picking it right up where we left off last time. We're in a lot more solid footing now, and I think we can begin to talk about some of these things. So I did give you in your packet a copy of the presentation from last time. It was very short, and I think that was on purpose because we wanted to be here to collaborate and kind of take your comments and help you more than us tell you what we should do with the sidewalk network. It's really a political and a policy decision. So we have another very brief presentation that Travis has with just a handful of slides. So he'll go through that. Then we'll have Regis all set up so that if you start to ask questions about certain areas of the city, we can be very interactive, pull it up, talk through pros and cons, take some notes down, and help you work towards the next budget cycle. So with that, Travis.
Good evening. I don't know if you caught that earlier. You can talk about, Scott said we had a few slides. We literally used the 19 slides and just slapped something on top of them to keep this conversation rolling forward. Actually, a little more than that. So as you noticed back on I think last time we talked, we titled it Sidewalk Gaps. It's more accurately titled Sidewalk and Trail Gaps, non-motorized connectivity. When I think of sidewalk and trails, I personally view the trails kind of like the interstate system and the sidewalk more like our local street system that gets us there. So with that being said, we're actually going to start out with a trail map. This map's on our city website, and it's changed over the years, and there's been, I think when it started 15 years ago, there was very little blue and a lot more yellow on there, just kind of ideas for trails. And over the years, we've been successful in building more trails, the tunnel under Lake Michigan Drive, and then there's just a few little areas kind of left to go. So just to kind of highlight some areas of recent trail development, it's Waldorf and Kinney. We reconstructed it this past summer, and that was a road project. But along with that road project, we were able to secure a Transportation Alternatives Program grant to build 10-foot wide sidewalk on the east side of the road and 5-foot wide sidewalk on the west side of the road. The 10-foot wide sidewalk doubles as a trail and kind of connects the Standale Trail, which currently terminates in City Central Park in this complex right here, kind of extends it up to 3 Mile. That's as far as we could get it. We're trying to eventually get the Standale Trail to connect into the Pioneer Trail, which is that little yellow gap that I'll talk about further later. So this was one step in the right direction there. Another trail project that was recently completed was the Kent County Parks Department's Pioneer Trail, which connects the Muscatawa Trail to the west to the White Pine Trail to the east and north. And so that was a project that the Parks Department worked on with the Road Commission as their engineer. We've been involved with them. That's one of the pictures right off of the end of 3 Mile. It's a pretty successful project. So back to how do we connect our Standale Trail into the Pioneer Trail? That's that yellow piece on the map, and we all know that that is an incredibly costly piece because it goes part and parcel with a bridge across the interstate. So there are grants being applied for to fill in that gap, more so than just the trail. It would be an all-inclusive project that you're all very well aware of. Some smaller projects that we just were able to complete recently were some neighborhood trail connections. I'll back out so you can see it again. There's these little green tick marks kind of down in the Second Ward area that pop up. And we had some requests over the years to connect in existing neighborhoods of Sydney and 10th and the Calvert area and Lincoln Lawns Park to make little stubs to connect these neighborhoods directly into the trail system. It took a while because we had to deal with Consumers Energy and ITC, had to get the proper permitting in place. Finally got it in place. DPW installed these trail links. We've heard nothing but good thanks from residents over these connections. So It's another recent success project. And then I'll back off again here real quick. You're going to see some orange dots pop up. So the picture right there is a pedestrian refuge island on Remembrance Road. I'm kind of between the retirement center and the Dollar General area there. That was built a number of years ago. And these refuge islands allow pedestrians to just look one way across the street, have some refuge, then look the opposite direction. We've had good comments on that, and so now we're looking at those kind of 5 orange dot areas. There's some other areas throughout the city that we're looking at other ways of dealing with trail crossings of streets, but that's something that we're looking into right now. So that's kind of, like we said, trails kind of lay the backbone or the interstate system of our whole non-road areas network. With that being done with trails, we now go over to sidewalk. Well, sidewalk and trail gaps. So this is the same list we talked about in 2019. We've updated it somewhat. Not every single cost estimate has been updated because it takes, well, costs are going up and it takes a little bit of effort to update every single one of these. But most of these costs are still from 2019 unless there's an asterisk next to it. Those we updated into 2021 costs. And I think I'll highlight a few projects here. So you'll see highlighted there in a yellowish orange is 2 potential 2022 community development block grant candidate projects. So one is on 4 Mile, just west of Alpine Avenue, the south side from Cordis to Alpine. We're looking to fill in some gaps there of where sidewalks currently missing. And then the other one is on Leonard. This is west of Wilson. On the south side, we're looking to connect in the trailer park area there into the existing sidewalk network. It's important if you go down there in the winter. I've got a couple pictures of kids walking to school in the snow in the street because there is no sidewalk there. Both of those locations fall within very distinct community development block grant blocks. There's only a few throughout the city, so those become eligible. We have not received the funding yet, but I think we're going to be applying for one or both of those. Okay, in 2026, a few years out, Scott was successful in getting us another transportation alternatives program grant for some sidewalk on Bristol, basically south of 3 Mile. So you can see there that it's pretty costly. When you add up those 2 segments, you're getting close to $1 million. We so far got a $400,000 TAP grant for it. That's still a ways out, could go up. But that's good news that we have a large grant chunk to go towards that big project. And then the last 2 that are there, they look a little pinkish to me showing up here, are I call it the Maperu neighborhood. Maperu and Sunset Hills and 10th. And these cost estimates, along with the community development block grant ones, were updated recently because we knew there's a lot of discussion going on about filling in these gaps. So we wanted to make sure we had good costs. So with that being said, we've got this gap list that totals about $4.5 million plus, because like we said, some of these costs are kind of old. But those are some of the projects that we're kind of highlighting for the future, and specifically on the Maperu area, those are our 2 new updated cost estimates that we worked with Prine and Newhoff on, came from the end of August. We don't need to go through them line item by line item, but they're kind of summarized in this map here. So this Maperu Sunset Hills neighborhood to the north of the Lincoln Country Club development has a lot of sidewalk in it. The only areas that don't have sidewalk are the areas highlighted in orange and blue. So if you wanted to fill in the orange, you're looking at roughly $310,000. You're going to fill in the blue, roughly $180,000. Both of them, you would total those 2 up, and we get around 500. So that's kind of that area. So with that being said, we kind of wanted to open this up for discussion. So you can tell we kind of took a big citywide view and then kind of narrowed into one particular specific area. We can talk about any areas though at this point, and so I'll let Scott take over here.
Yeah, if you want to get Regis up, I think that'll help too. So I think the highlight there with the Sunset Hills and Maperu, again, that's not the engineering department pushing that project on you. That's a whole lot of kind of behind the scenes discussion related to different developments that are going on and transportation trends, and the idea that I think you wanted to have a really good idea what that one would cost if you were to take a look at it. So with that, we'll open it up and hopefully we can have 15 minutes or so of good, open discussion.
Commissioner Burke, start with you.
Well, first of all, thank you. You answered a lot of my questions already, because you were right all over the things I was going to ask about, which is great, that we're all kind of talking in the same key ideas. The Bristol and Pinal area, 3 mile down to Pinal, I certainly like that one, and in conjunction with the idea that we're going to break out that railroad track 1 lane through, assuming we're going to go through that project. It'd be nice if we have a holistic view of the area, because I think it will probably greatly increase traffic. I mean, I just guessed that, I could be wrong, but that way if folks are upset that now there's so much traffic going on, when we're putting in a sidewalk to accommodate that as well. That seems like a nice long view of things. And then certainly Maple Row in conjunction with Waterford Village, if we're gonna go with one Maple Row as a sidewalk, at least in one of those areas, seems to be a good idea to me. You didn't mention Custer, is the only thing I had on my list you didn't mention. If we were gonna contemplate opening up Custer along with the Waterford Village development, I would wanna be talking about sidewalks there too, or not do it. Because I think that's a pretty narrow street. If we're gonna try and open it to the new village below, we're gonna have to have sidewalks up there. It's just not gonna be safe. And then one last bit, I'm not familiar with 3 mile extending all the way down to that new trail. I'm familiar with some of it, but I don't know that exact route, and I live there, so I'm gonna go check that out, because I'm scratching my head. I don't remember a way to get through there on a trail, but I'll go take a look at it. That's it. Thanks, Mayor.
East of Alpine, you mean?
If you, 3 mile coming east, yeah, you run into a, dentist or something.
Yeah. It's really kind of a hidden gem because you don't really know it's there, and 3 Mile has always been a dead end. And as part of an earmark that was sitting around for about 10 years before this could be realized, that connection east-west across town was completed, and that was built not in the old 3 Mile right-of-way because that had been abandoned, but up against the highway. And so if you go down the end of 3 Mile, it'll meander to the north just a little bit and kind of circle back, and you go through a heavily wooded area. It's really nice. And then
Okay,
you
I'll
end
check
up
it
down
out.
at Land Camp and Hillside.
Comes out in that cul-de-sac, right there, and there's some gates, some heavy gates, I think on the land camp side.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, down in there. But it is tucked in there pretty good.
Yeah, and it's a nice walk, it's a nice ride, and, Travis mentioned some of the connections. We're one connection short of having the whole city, everything connected, so that you could go north, south, east, and west on our network. You mentioned Cooster, maybe I'll jump on that real quick. That one is not gonna be as transferable in terms of the sidewalk cost. So, for example, if you looked at one of these other projects and said, well, if it's the same length, it's probably gonna be the same cost. Cooster, because it's a rural road, it's really got a ditch section, trees are very close to the road. There's a lot of extras that come into that where, you really can't just slap the sidewalk in. I think the houses are also a little bit closer to the road. So we'd have some work to do there. And I think if that came out of the discussion tonight as a strong candidate, we would go back and get you a really tight estimate on that. Either one side of the road or the other, but I think either side, they're both gonna be a little bit pricey.
I'd like to have that added to the list, though, because I think that that's prudent to this potential project, as a potential project for upcoming consideration. And I also agree with Commissioner Burke regarding Maple Row. I think that we need to, if that water for development, there's just a lot of conversation about that. I think we need to put a lot of our focus on that. And another comment that I have is, I know that my immediate neighborhood really loves the connectivity of right by Waldorf and Kinney on the trail there. That has really been helpful. I know that even when I'm running, when I do my longer routes on the weekends, I really like that, and I feel safer crossing that area. I'm still somewhat concerned about the trail area over by the nursing home by Dollar General, and I know that we have that in our vision on making that more of a safer crossing area. But those are my only comments. But this is great detail, not only for us as commissioners, but for us to forward on to to our residents when necessary, or be able to speak with it with a little bit more intelligence. So greatly appreciate all that you and your team do, Scott.
Thank you. We did not get as many thank you notes as we usually get for that Waldorf connection, which is usually 0. But I think with the road being so delayed, I think a lot of people were just happy to just get the orange stuff out of there, so.
Hey, I completely
We agree.
understand, and I just had my windows washed due to all the construction today. So yes, I completely understand that.
Commissioner Chase?
I noticed on there you had for Maple Road, you had sidewalk on both sides. Is there advantage of putting sidewalk on both sides versus the one side? Because I know we've had discussion about one side or the other, or is it better to have it on both?
I'd say there's always an advantage to having it on both sides. Historically, as we've looked at expanding our network, we've taken one side if that's all we could get. So streets like parts of Kinney, for example, it's just on one side, and you know, at the time that's really all we could afford to do, because it was kind of teamed together with, like on Cooster, we had trees that had to come down, we had drainage that had to be solved. There's just a whole lot that goes into that. I think on most new streets you'll see it on both sides. So it's really just a preference and a budgetary decision.
So if we would just do one side, then we could eventually do the other half if we wanted to then?
You could always go back and do the other side.
Okay.
My guess, and I would probably say the advantage there in this specific instance is around the fact that if, assuming this Lincoln Lawns project were to move forward, you're theoretically, the concern is that you would be pushing a lot of traffic up Maple Row, or down Maple Row, whichever you would call it, and that you would want to not force those street crossings to use the sidewalk, theoretically. And I speculate here.
You know, and I think when you do look at a street that doesn't have sidewalk and decide we just want to do one side, I can almost promise you there'll be a debate that comes in about which side you pick, and we'll be wrong, because there'll be a pretty heavy debate, and that's actually a big part of the discussion tonight. I think that if you start to come up with a couple projects you want to look at, you know, we would recommend that we have some public meetings with the residents. We've had some failures in the past where we kind of charged forward on a project and got it all designed and had the neighborhood meeting just before construction, only to find out that 80 or 90% of the people didn't want it. And so I think it's good to reach out in advance and make sure that there's a desire for that, and make them ask for it. And if they do, then everybody can be happy in the end. So I think it's a necessary step, really.
Good to my left. Commissioner Groders. Commissioner Glanville?
Yeah, as always, excited to see what we're doing with the trails as well as the sidewalks. One thing I wanted to just point out too with that, that, you know, as I understand it, the history of the trail, it was kind of a NIMBY project when we started, and now we have residents asking for connection to that. So it really speaks to the value of the trail in our community, and I'm pleased to see that you know, so many have come around on that, and that we can offer that, you know, as a health and wellness type of amenity. I wanted to ask about the refuge areas, or the additional little dots that you had on there. I know we've talked a little bit about standardizing the signage for trail crossing. Is that what you're talking about with those? Or are you really thinking about putting in a refuge there, or what's the thought behind some of those?
Right. So I think when we were looking at just upgrading one of those, we came to you and said, we'd really like to look at more standardization and looking at the 4, 5, 6 of these that we have, and trying to have a consistent message and theme, so that we didn't have a hawk signal at one, which is a certain kind of a stop sign, and the rapid LED lights flashing at you, another one, and yet another one. We just had yellow crossing lights for the pedestrians, but nothing for the traffic. And that's kind of what you have in Grand Rapids, where they've tried lots of different things. And we were hoping to learn from a lot of our neighbors and be consistent. And so we've got a letter proposal in our office right now from one of our consultants to help us with that, and to look at the 5 locations that are on the major road network and try to come up with a plan where we could have a template that we could use. It's not going to be a perfect fit, but to be as consistent as we possibly can at some of these other locations. And then we can bundle those locations into a competitive grant where we can show connectivities to city campuses and libraries and schools and churches and business districts, and all the things that you get points for when they grade grant proposals. So we think this is a really great opportunity to make all those upgrades at one time. We're just in that first couple of steps right now, trying to make sure that the proposal that we have in front of us is what we want to see. And one of the things that we really want to make sure that we get out is not just a study of what that template would look like, but what are the rules and how can we get the word out on how you're supposed to behave at those? Because Daryl and I met with Ken Crombine, seems like about a month ago now. We were asking a lot about his trail crossing, and they've said that they're actually pulling their yellow flashing lights out of there because it was causing way too many rear end accidents, because you'd have the good Samaritan that would see the flashing yellow and slow down to want to stop, and the one behind him who's late for work who says, I don't have to stop. That's it's a warning. It's not a stop. And so part of it is to get the message out clearly, make sure that we have the ordinances in place to govern that, and not just patch things together. We want to be continuous if we can.
Yeah, no, that's a great strategy.
So we're working on it, and it's coming. We thought we had a grant lined up for that, and I think we talked a little bit about that through CMAQ, but CMAQ is congestion mitigation, air quality. And as we were going through the emission calculations, it was really, really hard to get that to fit, and we were pretty sure it was going to be denied after talking to some MDOT folks. So we've kind of adjusted and shuffled there, but this would be a really good candidate for what we call a statewide TAP grant. When you send it, not to compete with our neighbors, but to compete at the state level, and I think this would rank very high.
Good. I appreciate the forward thinking and the whole package there. I guess one thing I was wondering with the pedestrian islands, and just as a thought here, I don't know that we would need them at all of those crossings, but thinking about some of the higher traffic, like particularly Leonard, that might be nice, although I can, that's a whole different construction conversation.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking of the higher traffic areas where we might want to put a pedestrian island.
Right, and some of them it would fit very well, and there's a few others that it's not gonna be a perfect fit. Kinney and Waldorf is one that's not gonna be a perfect fit, and we're gonna really have to make an effort to get that to go. And then we've got, O'Brien is one that's kind of a tough fit, but it's not high volume, but it's high speed, and so to me, it's a very important one to do something. And we've always kind of had in our mind that something had to happen there, and this is a great chance to look at what would be a good addition to our system there.
So keeping on trails here for a second too, I know we've struggled to get that connector with the highway rebuild for quite a while now. And I'm wondering, have we ever looked at extending the trail just down 3 Mile?
To the west?
East.
Through the industrial area,
Mm-hmm.
right. We really haven't looked seriously at it. We've got some estimates we've put together for improvements through there, but the biggest improvement that's needed there is another lane. There's 4 lanes, so you don't have a center turn lane.
Right.
The lanes are all too narrow already for trucks. I think you've all experienced that. So I think our vision there, at least at staff level, has been to try to get a 5-lane road through there at some point. And at that time, we would automatically put the sidewalks in to complete the network, because we're probably 25% populated, I would guess, with sidewalk through there. And every time we make somebody put in sidewalk, they say, it's a sidewalk to nowhere. Why are you making me do this? And we say, it's a step forward.
Right.
We're getting there slowly but surely. And it's worked in other places around the city, and I think we're making some progress on 3 Mile. So the answer is yes, we could probably pull something off, but we have to be very careful about how if we were to jump forward and just do trail or sidewalk now, how's that going to fit with the long-term plan for the road and those improvements? And those are really expensive improvements, by the way.
Yeah.
So I don't see that happening in the next year or two.
Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to ask about, I know we've talked about, and I appreciate the concerns and urgency around the development in Meadowbrook, but I'm wondering about some of the other areas that I know have been on our list for a while. And this one, it might be the sidewalk du jour, but I wonder if we're forgetting areas that have been, popular issues in the past that maybe we weren't able to get to, and so that it's kind of quieted down, and now this one is, or Maple Row, that Maple Row is the one that's, kind of top of mind today, but are there some that have been top of mind that have kind of, do you understand what I'm saying?
And Bristol's been one of those, and I feel really good about the fact that we were able to to get some money at least in 2026 to help with that. I think that's gonna be a great improvement, and the fact that we have a placeholder in that year is the most important part. The dollar amount's not quite as important because that can fluctuate based on the infrastructure bill and on how much more money comes in and things like that. But, you know, our partners around the table really came together to help us with that one because we did really well this year with grants. And then, you know, that was the very last part of this whole process. And, you know, we were almost lifted up as if, you know, you deserve another project, here you go. So feel really good about that. But that placeholder could turn into 600,000 or even more. So we feel good there. Kinney was obviously another really high priority. That was one that, you know, through the years, I've seen children walking to school down that road. There was no sidewalk, there was no shoulder. You know, for me to see that there's now a sidewalk, that's a huge safety enhancement. But there's others that we've talked about. We've talked about Ferris. We've talked about some sidewalk at Richmond and Wilson.
That's my favorite intersection.
there's a lot of hot
And I think the
spots.
mayor has some, you know, love for that intersection as
Right.
well.
I think we all do. So there's a lot of hot spots, and
Yeah,
it's,
and that's
it's,
what I'm just trying to keep in mind, like, I guess, you know, how we go about deciding on priorities here.
yeah, and we don't envy you and have to make those choices. We get the easy job because you give us a project to do, and we love to do projects, and we get to go do it. But the hard part is you have to pick winners and losers.
Yeah. All right, well, with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague here to the right.
Yeah, I'll try to be pretty quick here. We're running on time. But first I want to say I think the Maperu neighborhood, we all kind of have coalesced around the importance of that improvement, and I think that for the engineering perspective, I'm glad to see the updated numbers. I'm sure that'll be a finance committee discussion at some point, but I think we've all kind of rallied around the importance of making that improvement there for safety through that neighborhood. Scott, I just wanted to confirm for my part. So 2026, the TAP grant on Bristol. So that kind of firms up that date for when that improvement will be made, theoretically, pending some kind of significant change that prevents us from taking it on.
Yeah, I feel really good about that. That's a super solid bookmark for us. It would most likely be on the east side of the road from
Yep.
Bristol south to the Panel Bridge and the railroad bridge there. And it scored really, really high. I think it was the second highest scoring project on the list, which you look at that area and think, how is that? But you've got a school on either end, and there's just a whole bunch
I
of really
really think
important
that,
connections. So we were very lucky.
Yeah. So I growing up, I used to like run along that side of Bristol. And I know that I've got family members in the neighborhood who do, and like I've seen other people walking dogs and stuff up and down Bristol, and it connects a number of pretty sizable neighborhoods, that road as a whole, I guess. And I think someday I'd love to get to that Bristol north of 3 Mile as well, up to Bristol Ridge, connecting them down to the rest of the sidewalks on our side of town, but that's another discussion.
Yeah, and that one is on our, I should have mentioned this before, we have what's called an illustrative list. And so in addition to the projects that get grants, there's a big pool of projects that didn't get grants.
Yep.
But we still go through all of the due diligence with the Metro Council, which is like environmental compliance and environmental justice, and doing all these public hearings, so that if money does pop up, those projects are ready to go,
Yep.
and you just plug them in, and that's one of those projects.
Perfect.
And I think with the little barricade, Travis and I were just talking about this, a little barricade on the west side of the road when you get to the highway, you know, that just screams, fund me.
Yeah.
Because the sidewalk comes right up to the highway and just stops.
Yep, I drive by that frequently. Always throws up something of an alarm bell. The other one, 3 Mile Indian Creek to Walker. Isn't there sidewalk there under that bridge and stuff?
There is, we debate that. Technically sidewalk on the bridge, but there's 2 parcels that are missing it, so it's just filling in. the 2
Got it,
parcels
okay.
that have a continuous paved
That's helpful.
network, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I think, and to lead to what Travis was saying, sometimes there's spots that we know it's not gonna meet all the criteria and the guidelines, and you kinda just have to do your best to make the best connection you can. So that's kinda what you see down there.
Yep.
We certainly need to do an overhaul on all that at some point.
Yeah, and just on my last piece here, as far as the prioritization stuff, I think that's a discussion that would really bode well at the committee level, and I think that repurposing one of our committees in that direction would make a lot of sense to me. I've kind of talked to the mayor about it in the past, but seeing some change maybe, and I've talked about building committee in that way, that if we could repurpose that into more capital infrastructure, major improvements that we look at the city level, That might be a way to give that committee some purpose and get moving into a direction where we can get to some of this work that, you know, at this level, the full commission, it takes us a lot of time, and it might be a little more narrow in scope that would be better to look at that level, so. Just my piece.
All right, running us out here, I'm watching the time. I had three quick things. One was the Maperu Sunset Hills. When I add those two together, and it's not shooting the messenger, I just noticed, I mean, the 2019 price jumped from 405 to 490, so about a 20, quick math there, 22%, give or take, jump roughly. More due to right now materials costs, would we guess?
I think having a better feel, you know, if you're gonna ask me today, what's the number we should budget, I'm probably gonna say even higher, because as we saw the last couple projects that came out last year, the big contractors don't have time for the small projects, so the prices are gonna go way up.
Well, and that leads to one of the other points was I think we have to be careful too with that influx of federal money to all communities. There's a simple economics principle of supply and demand, and we're going to be on the wrong end of the demand's going to be so high, the supply is going to be tight for labor and materials cost as well. So these projects are going to take an exponential jump, would be my guess in the coming years here. The second thing was with the Maperu conversation, we not restate anything that's been said, but maybe to look at that in phases, and maybe we look at Maperu first, and then come back to the 10th and Nixon, because the Maperu piece, and I think we're all guidance from the commission up here. I think you're here, and I think we're all pretty passionate about that. If we feel like there's been a commitment made that somehow we're going to help with that growth and development in that area, and it is a safety concern through there. So there's probably not going to be CDBG money, so we're going to have to work on that from a budgetary perspective, but that's the guy at the end down here on the left, his thing to work with. So that's going to be all out. And then I think for the commissioners not been around a while, the CDBG piece is huge because we can leverage matching dollars for that. Mm-hmm. So we tend to target. So when I look at even hearing the piece on Leonard and Southside, by Commissioner Glanville and I, not too far away, I know that we see, sometimes kids walking out there as well, and it's not the most ideal situation. So that would, for me, have a big bullseye on it right away because we get matching monies out of that. Plus it solves a problem that we know exists. Last one on Kustor, I'm going to throw a little caution to the wind that it's for the neighbors there. We have to be careful what we wish for. When I look at that, Trev, could you zone in, please, on the yeah, and here's my concern is when you look, if you could apply on the layers, the right away.
It'll be in their yards, is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I think you're reading my mind. So when we look at this, and we had the same conversation with our friends from Maperu a few months back when we were talking about this, was we were talking about sidewalks on the side of the road. I said, what if we can only do one side? Whose side does it go on, and who's going to lose their yards? I think when we look at Kustor, when you look at the frontage on some of these houses and look where those, and this is not exact as far as those lines go on the right-of-ways and so forth, but we're going to be cutting it really, really close with some of those out to that road at that point. If we're going to be widening that road with curb and gutter and doing it to road specifications. So that's my only thing. Maybe I agree with Commissioner DeShane. It'd be nice to know, in a rough estimate of what that might be. But I think first and foremost, can we even do it there? Because we might not be able to get through some of the. There may be neighbors that don't grant us easement. We're not gonna cross that bridge from there then.
Yeah, I would say we can do anything that you want to pay for. It gets to how much do you want to pay for it?
Yeah.
Because that's the right answer from an engineering consultant. But
and the answer from the policymaker board, we're trying to keep our
Yeah.
constituents we represent happy. But I think part of it is, and even some of the newer homes on that street, been there for a little while anyway. But that's where I think it's going to hit it the hardest, and it may not even be doable. I think when we look at this, so could you please, maybe that adage of tell us what we need to hear, not what we want to hear.
how about
on
if we
road?
put that into almost like a letter report? Because I think there's more to it than just the cost.
Right,
And that's
yeah,
what we
yeah.
can give you some of the pros and cons in the background that'll help you as you look forward to that. And just looking at the aerial, you can see that Maple Row and Sunset are really set up great for sidewalk. The houses are far enough back. There's not really much of a ditch section. The front yards are graded well. Cooster just doesn't fit that same mold. It's going to be a lot harder.
Yep, okay.
Let's be proactive on that.
All right, Commissioners, anything else before we transition over? If not, I'd like to release our city engineer and assistant city engineer for the evening. Doesn't look like we'll need you for anything else.
Okay. Maybe
So anything you need from us in the meanwhile?
I think we've got some stuff here that we can work off of. Maybe one wrap-up comment would be that if we do start to fund some projects with local money, there is a benefit to using the local money. We don't have to deal with all of the wage rate stuff and prevailing wages and all the stuff that comes along with doing MDOT plans. There's probably a 25-30% savings pretty easily, and so the smaller jobs become more reasonable than they would if we were doing it with a grant or through an MDOT process. So we can do a little bit more of a hybrid work where we have a little bit of a city work involved in that kind of thing. So we'll get creative as we move forward.
Appreciate it. And then one of the things we talked about was for the rest of the commission on a go forward is looking at doing this maybe December roughly annually, and then just maybe some updates. There might be much, there might be none, but at least we'll have some idea of where we're at on things.
Yeah, it's a great way to kick off the budget cycle, and
Yep.
we'll call it a Christmas celebration.
There you go. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll let you guys go for the night then. Thanks again for staying well done on this.
Thank you.
All right, it is 7:07, a few minutes late, but we'll go ahead and call our regular city commission meeting to order, and I would like to ask Commissioner Chase to please deliver the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Shall we pray? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing all of us to gather here tonight. May tonight's work honor and please you. As we enter into this holiday season, may we all remember the true meaning of Christmas. Thank you for our city's staff, especially our firefighters and police who continue to keep us safe. May we also remember those whose Christmases may look different than last year. Be with our men and women who are serving our country and those who have lost loved ones this year. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. I'd like to invite everybody to stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. If I could please ask our clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Carey,
Present?
Commissioner Burke,
Present.
Commissioner Groders,
Present?
Commissioner Gilbert, Commissioner Chase,
Present.
Commissioner DeShane,
Present?
and Commissioner Glanville.
Present.
And next, thank you, Madam Clerk. Next on the list is approval of our December 13, 2021 minutes. If there's no discussion on said minutes, look for motion for approval and support, please.
Motion to approve the minutes, Mayor?
I'll support.
Commissioner Burke, seconded by Commissioner Chase. Any other discussion on the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Minutes are passed. Next on the list is any public comment on agenda items, and agenda items only. Going once, going twice. All right. Next on the list is consent agenda for the expenditures in the amount of $256,096.32. Is there any discussion on the bills? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval and support, please.
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner DeShane? Second. Commissioner Burke, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, expenditures are approved. Next on the list are two resolutions. First is Resolution 21-620, approving and authorizing and directing the mayor and city clerk to sign an indigent defense collaboration contract with the state of Michigan. So, Mr. DeVries, I know you've been waiting all day to make this presentation.
I got it, yep.
Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. I wanted to just, if we could, go through a short PowerPoint, just kind of to review the whole MIDC situation. I've been in front of you a couple times regarding this matter, so wanted to just do a brief review and kind of tell you where we are now and why we are here tonight for this resolution. So, as you may or may not recall, the MIDC has been in place for a few years. Their purpose is to better provide indigent persons charged with crimes representation by competent criminal defense attorneys. And so there have been 8 minimum standards that the commission has proposed, and 5 of them are now in place. The MIDC provides grant funds through a local court funding unit, so for basically for the cities, in our case at least, to help provide funds to do the costs so that we can adhere to those standards that are on us now for the court. And just as a reminder, the local unit has a responsibility, which is called a local share, and that basically is the amount that we were spending on that type of service, the indigent defense, prior to the MIDC enactment. And just so you have an idea, our local share is about $6,500 per year. So I bring that up because you'll see a different number later on, which makes it a good thing, I think. Is this the wrong clicker? Would you mind doing? Thank you. So as a review, we have the first 4 standards have been approved as of May of 2017, and listed on those are the 4 ones that we've been doing for the last few years. And I won't, you can read through them a minute if you would like. I won't get into great detail with that because we've seen that before. If you wouldn't mind, Sarah. So in order for us to do the first 4 standards, we at the City of Walker for the 59th District Court did a contract with the Kent County Office of Defender to provide those services on our behalf for the court. When we first started out with that arrangement, as you recall, the court there's a Walker division and a Granville division, and we were having to have a separate contract for the Granville portion and for the Walker portion, and we also had to do a separate grant application with MIDC for both. We did that for a couple of years. We were approached then by the City of Wyoming to join a collaboration with Wyoming, Kentwood, and our court to do 1 grant application, and that went really well. And so we did that in the fiscal year of 2021. I'm sorry, Sarah, if you would go forward. Yeah, right there. So the fiscal years 19 and 20, we were those separate grant applications. In 2021, we did the combined one. That worked out really well. And at the bottom part, you'll see there we did, as you may recall, a memorandum of collaboration for that agreement for all 4 cities in July of 2020. So that's what we were working off of. Now Standard 5 has taken place, and if you wouldn't mind going forward, Sarah. This 5th standard was approved in October of 2020, and basically the standard requires that the selection and oversight of indigent criminal defense counsel be performed by an attorney who's wholly independent from courts and the prosecutor's office. So we ran into an issue because we were basically having some of that work done by the Wyoming City attorney. That does not go well with MIDC because it's a conflict, basically. And so because of that conflict, when we put in our application for the grant, it was denied, basically, from that regard. So then we went to Plan B, which would be the next slide, if you would, please. Which you may recall, I was here a couple months ago about the Kent Indigent Defense Authority. So the idea was we would have an authority that covered all 4 cities. The authority would apply for the grant, and we would have then the authority would hire an independent and separate attorney to run and administer that grant on our behalf. We would also then hire an independent accounting firm to do the accounting for us. And the authority was governed by an 8-person board, basically 2 people from each community. So for us, it's Daryl and myself. And so that was what we had proposed. That had been relayed to MIDC staff, and we were under the impression that they were good with that. So we went ahead and did another agreement for all the cities, and that was in July of this year. So if you would mind going forward. So the authority actually met. We did RFPs for both the attorney services and for the accounting services. We did interviews of those that had applied. We actually only had 1 attorney apply, and we had 4 accounting services that did apply. And so we did down to 1, and we're going to make a recommendation for that. And so while we're doing that, we also submitted a updated grant application to MIDC based on that model. Unfortunately then, in October of this year, MIDC staff let the Wyoming people know that they were not going to recommend that they would approve our grant application. Basically, the MIDC staff said that they believed that the statute for MIDC would only allow a funding unit to apply for a grant, not an authority. So it got into a legal issue at that point. So the Wyoming City Attorney went to the next MIDC board meeting on October 19 to explain what our model was and why he felt that it was legally allowed for MIDC to grant that to an authority. Unfortunately, they did not agree with his thought process. And so we also saw an opinion from the state attorney general, never heard back on that one. That wasn't a high enough priority for them. So that's where we find ourselves right now. Basically, we are still trying to implement and keep this conglomerate group together, but what we had proposed is not going to work according to MIDC. So instead, MIDC has proposed this, which is along the same line but slightly different. So basically, MIDC wants to see that we hire an independent attorney, but that they become an employee of one of the funding units. And so, as it says up there, the position would be considered an employee of one of the funding units, and thankfully for us, Wyoming has agreed to take on that position, and has identified someone who's already interested and potentially could start in January. The position would work independent of the Wyoming Legal Department, meaning there would be no conflict between the prosecution office for the city of Wyoming and this new position. Instead, that position would report to the Wyoming city manager. The funding unit then would apply for the MIDC grant, which is what MIDC is after. And then that attorney administrator would administer the grant for the group. Unfortunately, the accounting piece would be put back on the city of Wyoming's finance department, and they have agreed to take that on again, but we were hoping to avoid that with our initial authority arrangement, but that's obviously not going to work. We would also keep the structure of the authorities board in place. So we would assist Wyoming in helping with that administrator, doing oversight for them, and also helping the Wyoming manager, with feedback. So we would still be involved from a city perspective as a conglomerate group, but basically Wyoming is the person that would be, or the entity that would be paying for it. But the position would be paid with MIDC grant funds. And MIDC staff also thinks that an administrative person may be needed as we go forward. So all of those things would be covered by the grant. And so on the bottom, I just wanted to point out that the grant that we're submitting now with this new proposal is about $700,000 of grant funds. That's a lot of money that would be covered by the grant. And again, our local share is $6,500. So that's a good deal for us, at least. So that's where we are tonight. Why you have that resolution in front of you, we basically just would like to keep that group together. It's really has worked well, at least for us selfishly, and would appreciate going and allowing us to continue on with that. The other thing that's happening is there are going to be standards 6 through 8 that are coming forward too, and from what we understand, this scenarios would work well for those upcoming standards per MIDC staff's recommendation. So that's kind of a summary of where we are with that. So if you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer those.
City Manager.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank Dan for keeping up with all of this and cooperating with the other communities, and most want to thank the city of Wyoming for taking this on, and Scott Smith, their attorney, and Curtis Holt for, working with all of us and making this a reality. The other units, I think 2 of them have approved the same resolution last week, and somebody else is looking at it tonight as well. So we're under some urgency to get this considered and then sent off to the state. So hopefully this administrator can start in January. So yeah, I know it was a confusing story, and it's been a long road, but I think this is really a good way to resolve it and get us through the other standards as well. So.
And this is going to resolve the issue, or is it still a proposal to this?
Yeah, we expect that it will resolve the issue.
Okay.
Until it's submitted to MIDC and they approve it, we won't have that
Yeah.
answer. But
Okay.
they recommended we go this route, so
Okay, so
we
they
hope
gave
they
you a
will.
recommendation, we're not just, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
This is based on their recommendation, okay.
Right.
Thank you.
I think with the authority, we had gone off some verbal conversations that had taken place. I think there was some misunderstanding, obviously. This is what they came back with, MIDC's
Good.
came back with.
All right.
Commissioners, comments, questions?
I would just say that I'm totally supportive, and I think this is great, and I'm glad the city of Wyoming is willing to act as the agent for this program for us. But I will say, for all that you guys have gone through, you could have just as easily changed state statute to allow for the authority.
Yeah, there was, we kind of got hung up at that point because there was some real talk about, can the statute be changed? Can there be a legal, thing that, but the problem was we were going to run out of time, and there's only so many more chances we can apply for the grant for this year or so.
Again, I think this is it was an eloquent solution that you guys developed, and now it is the state's version of that eloquent solution. So more power to you guys.
Thanks.
All right, commissioners, any other questions or comments? Otherwise, hearing all the discussion and the presentation, thank you again, Dan. Yep. Entertain a motion for approval and support if there's no disagreement with the proposed resolution.
Happy to make a motion.
I'll support.
Commissioner Gilbert, Commissioner DeShane, support. Any other discussion on Resolution 21-620? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, we're done. You may go home now. Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. All right, next on the list is Resolution 21-621 for board and committee appointments. What you have in front of you, there's been some change with the resident appointments, moving some folks from community engagement to more strategic spots where we had needs to be filled on other committees. For the city commission itself, because there's some projects that I know people are passionate about that they wanted to get finished and things done. I just elected basically for this year was just a renewal of where everybody was at. I made one, I think, minor change. It was Commissioner DeShane, it was the building authority. We had one of the wards not represented, so I flopped Commissioner DeShane and Commissioner Gilbert with 2 committees. So I think emergency planning to that. But other than that, by keeping this status quo, it allows people to finish the project, some of the new committees and so forth, things that we started. So that was the mindset behind the appointment. So any discussion on the committee appointments?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions or points of discussion. So I noticed that the County Waste Management Advisory Committee is not on the list this year. Is that something we're stepping away from, or is
We
that
don't
an
make those
oversight?
appointments. We're not consulted, we're not, so those are not city appointments, so they should not be a part of a city resolution.
Oh, all right.
Yes, I mean, I had no idea you were on those until you brought it up one night.
No, I was originally I recall originally being appointed to the waste to energy. that
We
you
don't
did-
even do,
That originally you had appointed me
oh,
to
I
that.
think that is an oversight. My apologies. So we need to, but I thank you for calling this out. I'm so sorry. So my discussion with the clerk was, I said the community action was one that I
Right,
had no idea.
no, that one shouldn't be on there.
Sorry, so we're gonna make
Waste
one
energy.
amendment to this. Thank you for the catch, I'm sorry. And I should have, we talked Saturday and I should have asked, so we're good with everything. So we have to make one change. Yes, waste to
Yeah.
energy, which I'm assuming the commission will be fine with, because you've served us well on that. We've had some good
Thank you,
dialogue.
yeah.
So my mess on that. The other one, we left off, I guess,
Yes.
statutorily.
Right, it
Not
shouldn't be there.
something, yeah,
Yeah.
yep, so.
Yep. Another concern I had, or question I had, or observation, it would appear on the Finance Committee, we don't really have the third ward represented. I know Commissioner Gruters is an alternate there, but, you know, since that, she can't actually attend the meetings, because that would then put us over quorum, I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to switch out one of, you know, maybe, and not that Roxanne, Commissioner DeShane is not worthy of being on the committee, but we have two from the second ward on the Finance Committee. And I'm just wondering if there should be some consideration to make sure that there's a third ward representative who has a voice in those meetings.
I really like being on the Finance Committee.
Yeah,
I think it suits my skill set.
I could see us, if we try to do that though, running into issues though with any committee then, because we only have 3. So if you try to move any of them, I don't know, you're always gonna have like 2 overlapping, you know?
no,
Well, I think the problem you run into is when you consider the mayor as
Yeah.
a second ward representative.
That's what I was
right?
trying to say. Yeah, okay.
Whereas he is kind of expected to be an advocate for the city as a whole in his role,
Not just the board.
right? I get what you're saying, I do, but I just, because then you guys, the second ward commissioners can't sit on as many committees if you consider it that way,
Right, because then that-
structurally,
the
because
same
he would
issue
have to, he would have to be the second ward
The same-
person for everyone that he sits on.
Ordinance committee would be another example.
Or
Right.
personnel committee would be another example.
Yeah, Carol and I will always be affected by that if that's the case, because Gary resides in the second ward.
yeah, well, like I said, I was just kind of looking at balance for the third ward and for them to have a strong voice on a strong committee. So,
Well, you notice there's no sidewalks in the third ward either.
that's right. So yeah, just an observation, and I mean, you know, if the third ward is comfortable, I guess the point is moot.
Good.
So, I was wondering on the list that we had from last year, we had the start dates for people. And on the list we have this year, it only shows when their term ends. So I didn't know if that was just for the resolution, and it would be recorded differently when it's posted online, or?
Correct. This is the resolution. When we do the roster, you'll see everything.
Okay.
But this is just the resolution format.
Okay. And I do have some ongoing concerns about folks who've been on some of these committees for a very long time, and I know that's something I brought up a little bit last year as well, and particularly with the Planning Commission, in that, you know, there are people who've been on that over 10 years. We tend to hear a lot of input or comments from the residents that, you know, development doesn't necessarily go the way they want it to go, and I think it would be helpful for us if we could get some fresh voices on the Planning Commission, just so that folks can see that there's, you know, that it's not the same people year after year after year. And the Planning Commission is a pretty powerful commission, and I'm not sure residents are aware exactly that they hold that power of leading development in the city, and certainly they work with the staff and they work with us, but still, you know, that's, I mean, we all know the role of the Planning Commission. So I just have some concerns there, and also on that committee, the lack of diversity. And, well, frankly, throughout all our committees, but we are working on that, and I appreciate that we've made some, you know, real serious changes this past year in organizing and getting our committee structure a little bit more formalized. So I appreciate all that, and I hope that we'll start to see more diversity, you know, as this new process comes into play. But like I said, I'm particularly concerned about the Planning Commission at this point. Like I said, a lot of them were up, and I don't see a lot of changes, so.
So noted, thank you. All right, any other dialogue, commissioners? All right, on the planning piece, fair question, there was some tenure on there. There's not a board that, I did not go to, like even the Board of Review. We had 2 people with 20-plus years that are no longer on the board, that are stepping down. So what we were ahead of the time was appointing 2 alternates this past year, because we kind of saw this coming a year in advance. So those 2 people stepped from, Emily Glover being one of them, that somebody been interviewed for an opening here, elevated those 2 alternates to the board, so it was seamless. They were here all of 2021, so the plan worked. And then we've added a new alternate that we moved from community engagement this year, so it's moving people right seat on the bus. This is realtor background. From the planning commission side, having talked with our community development director, talked with city managers, getting for feedback, city engineer, who's not in the room obviously either, and then the planning commission chair and vice chair, getting feedback from all. The unanimous consent was to please with all the developments taking place, and that there are some things already in process, major, like English Hills and Stoneleigh, that right now making any type of change with that group would be somewhat disruptive to the process. And I understood it, I heard it, but I hear your message on the go forward, and so noted.
I'm just not sure that, I mean, when is a good time to make a change on the planning commission, right? I mean, we could say that at any point, and so I just think, I appreciate the input and the work that you've gone to on this, and I just want to maintain that we need to be a little bit more proactive, I think, in this. Continue to be proactive. Like I said, we've made some good changes, but.
Fair. Okay. Any other discussion on appointments? Do we lose, there's Frank hiding back there. All right, seeing you dropped, I want to see my symmetry there. All right, any other discussion on committee appointments? All right, otherwise I'll entertain a motion for approval and support then, please.
I'll make a motion.
And I should.
With the amendment.
With the amendment, please, thank you. Yes, so with the amendment of appointing Commissioner Glanville to the County Waste to Energy as representative for our city. And you're going to have a busy year with that. You know that, so. So, all right, so that being said, we'll come back to that. With the amendment we've just discussed, we have a motion for approval from Commissioner Chase.
I'll support.
Support to Commissioner Groders. Any other discussion on the said appointments? Comments, feedback noted. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passed. Thank you. All right. And then next is the second reading of Ordinance 21-663, Stormwater Management. This is our Eagle requirement, getting that in order, and not rocket science on this one. It's the second reading. We had a presentation from Rachel last week, who did a fabulous job on that. And I love people that get passionate. She really is into this and the impact it makes on the city. So that all being said, any other discussion on this ordinance? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for approval and support, please.
Make motion?
I'll support it.
All right, I'm gonna give Commissioner Glanville, I heard both, but I heard out of my right ear better, so. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, Ordinance 21-663 is passed. Next is, Counselor may approach the podium if you want. Is first reading Ordinance 21-664 to amend Chapter 76, Article 3, entitled Property Tax Exemption for Senior Citizen Housing Project of the Code of Ordinances for the City of Walker. I'll let you brief us on the background, and then from you, I'll ask our city manager to chime in with anything extra not covered. So, David, the floor is yours.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mayor. Dave Eberly with the City Attorney's Office. We're here today to do a first reading of a pilot ordinance. This pilot is regarding what is currently known as Coventry Woods Apartments. In your packets, you have a letter from the developer, from Vice President of Development and General Counsel Mike Stefanko. He's also here today. And if the commission would like to hear from him, he's more than happy to talk the commission through what the project is, what they anticipate doing, and answer any of your questions. Also attached in your packet is the current pilot and then the proposed new pilot.
Dave, can you tell them what a pilot is? So.
Payment in lieu of taxes. So instead of paying ad valorem property taxes, they would pay a percentage of the shelter rents collected. It provides an incentive for developers to put in projects, and they work with low-income housing it works with low-income housing tax credits or MSHDA loans or some other qualifying financing mechanism. And really it's just a way to not subsidize from the city's end, but I'll say provide an incentive for developers to bring more affordable housing to a community, and makes the numbers work better on their end to where they can continue to provide that. And we have the proposed ordinance before you today. I guess there's two conversations for the commission today. One is the application before it and the ordinance that's proposed right now. And this would be more or less continuing what is being done now. Hey, we like the development, we like what you're doing, we understand there's going to be some new ownership, we want to keep it, we want to move forward quickly because they have an acquisition and development timeline that Mike can go into a little more detail on, and we want to move forward. The current ordinance, or the current pilot, is a 4% pilot. That money gets collected and then gets distributed to the other taxing units, just like any other, like we would for ad valorem property taxes. The proposed ordinance has a 4% pilot as well as a 1% administration fee. Developers have asked that the commission consider either reducing the pilot to 3% and keeping the administrative fee, which the city retains all of, or eliminating the administrative fee and just keeping a 4% pilot, so that they're paying 4% across the board. So there's some discussion to be had there. I'm sure Mike would be happy to answer any of your questions regarding financing and why they are asking for what they are asking for. So that's the one issue, is this project specifically. I'll also note that in the ordinance proposed, be 38 years, consistent with what they think the term of their loan or their financing mechanism will be. The current pilot is just elderly. This expands it to elderly, disabled, low income. So essentially, if you qualify under the state act for a pilot, we're not restricting you any further in the new ordinance, which I think would be beneficial. But it's definitely something the commission can talk about and talk to Mike about the long-term plans for the project. Because as I understand it, you guys intend to manage it all the way through. Yeah. Okay, so that's the one ordinance, which Mike is happy to answer questions on and talk to the commission about. The second one is the broader picture of how the city wants to approach pilots in general. And usually this question pops up when there's a pilot in the hopper. Usually this is when municipalities are like, oh, maybe we should talk more generally about pilots. What we have found to be beneficial is, if the city wants to take a more long-term look at pilots, is to say, we're going to a general ordinance that lays out the application process, some left and right limits in terms of what that agreement has to have in it. And then if somebody goes through the process, they come before the commission and it's a negotiation, but the end result is not a pilot ordinance, it's a pilot agreement that's ratified by the commission. And in doing that, there's more room for negotiation between the parties. We're a little more comfortable in ways we can address some of the situations, like MSHDA does not look kindly upon pilot ordinances where we say they're revocable. If you don't comply, or if you do something we don't like, we can revoke it, because that'll mess up their financing. And how we've gone around that in some of the pilot agreements that we've done through some of these other ordinances is, okay, we're not going to revoke it, but we're going to set up an escrow account, and you're going to fund the escrow account, and if you're out of compliance for that time period, you're going to pay out of your escrow account the difference between the pilot and the ad valorem tax rate, because we don't want to give you a break when you're out of compliance. And a lot of other issues, if there's a concern for security, we can put more particular requirements in there and things like that. So that is the way our office recommends moving forward, big picture. But we understand that there is a desire to potentially keep the pilot that is currently existing moving forward, and given the development timelines, it might be more prudent just to move forward with the ordinance before the commission today. Darryl, do you want to add anything else on that?
No, it makes sense. You know, in speaking with Dave when this first came up, a little bit of background, we only have 2 pilots in the city. We have this one and the one off of Alpine. What's that one called, Dan? Kingsbury Place Apartment. So we don't see these that often, but it would be nice to have something in place. So if we do have another one that comes in, we have more of a process to follow. But I instructed Dave, I said on this one, you know, Coventry Woods has been a great neighbor, they're a great resident. Let's kind of keep things status quo for that location. We have a new owner, going to do the same thing, make some improvements. So I'm comfortable with amending the ordinance as recommended, and then also maybe taking a broader view long-term. We're not in a huge hurry to do that, but perhaps we can get that to the ordinance committee sometime after the first of the year and kind of, draft something up and get a structure in place for that. Just the one comment on the percentage, Dave's highlighted that at the beginning, the 4% and the 1% administration fee. Dan and I spoke on that, and when we looked at this project, we wanted to really keep things status quo, and it's status quo right now at 4%. We would recommend just keeping it at the straight 4% and not do the 3 and 1. The amount of dollars that the city receives off of this is pretty minimal on a pilot because we have to pass on our money to all the other taxing jurisdictions, and with our tax rate so low, I think we get less than $1,000 a year for payments. So we would recommend that we just strike the administrative fee altogether and keep the 4%, so it make things a little bit easier for Dan to administer every year when he has to do his reports. So.
And I'm sure there will be some changes. This goes through the staff review process and the MISTA review process. I'm sure there will be some changes between this first reading and the second reading, but as long as we're keeping the substantive parts the same, I probably will be comfortable considering this a first reading and moving on to a second reading just to move this along. But that said, I really appreciate if the commission could if they decide to move forward, let's nail down the term and the 4% issue. If we can keep those substantive terms the same, we can work with MISTA to flex a little bit on the other stuff, and then our plan would be to work with the developer and MISTA and wait for MISTA to approve it before we brought it back to the commission for the second and final reading and approval.
Okay.
Are there any further questions for me before I turn it over to Mike?
All right, and while Mr. Stefanko, we'll have you, if you'd come up to the commission, to the mic, please. Thank you, Councilor. Daryl, so real quick for the commission's edification up here, what we're asking is keeping the terms at 4%, leave the pilot program, so to speak, in place. So really not changing anything. We're just entering in a new agreement with the new owner.
Yeah, and for the term of 38 years that's been requested.
38, correct.
And then we would eliminate the section regarding the administration fee. That section that's proposed in the
And just say
ordinance.
the straight 4, not the 3 and the 1 to
Correct.
make it an accounting
Correct.
mess. Okay. All right. Did you drive all the way from Novi this evening?
I didn't actually. I live in DeWitt, so I'm around Lansing. So the people
Okay.
in our office, a lot of them are further east.
We'll give you half a shout out then.
Exactly.
So I saw the Novi address on there. So all right, cool. Well, thank you. Please, any background about the company, and I think from the commission standpoint, what do you find appealing about Coventry Woods and entering into that?
So thank you. Well, I'm with Janosco Development Company. We are a affordable housing development firm located in Novi. The company's been in operation since the early 2000s, so approximately 20 years. Over that time, it went from a one-person office and then has grown over time to, as of right now, we have about 10 staff in our office, including myself. I'm in-house general counsel and vice president of development. I've been practicing in this world of affordable housing and private practice in Lansing for about 10 years prior to coming over. And I've been here for about 2.5 at this point. I'm very accustomed to handling these types of transactions and the financing components to them, specifically the pilots and the municipalities. As far as municipalities are concerned, these are really the single biggest driver for these types of properties in certain jurisdictions. Certain areas are a little bit more difficult to get them enacted. We do appreciate the fact that your community had previously approved this at 4, and the consideration that the city manager just indicated in keeping it that way. From our perspective, when we look at a property, one of the main things that we look at first really is, irrespective of that asset itself, just the surrounding area. So when you ask, what was, one of the drivers that led us to try to acquire Coventry Woods. It is that our initial review of, the economic factors surrounding that property kind of initially weeds that out, and then we go from there. So this was a property that scored very high from our perspective on those metrics, and then ultimately led us down the road to getting it under contract and having a development plan in place. That plan is to acquire the asset in January and then start a process with MISHDA to get tax exempt bond financing, which will then generate low-income housing tax credits. And really that equity is really what's going to be our driver in doing a larger rehabilitation of the asset. We anticipate that closing on the tax credit side to happen in 2022, mid-year, late 2022, when that's going to occur. And then construction would start hopefully right thereafter and be 12 to 15 months to get that completed, which is why we asked for the 38-year term. We'll have a 35-year mortgage, but that's not going to start running until after the rehabilitation is complete. And so really that's our plan for the property. If anybody has any questions as far as timing or financing, I'm happy to answer those.
All right, commissioners, I have a couple of thoughts in a sec, but I'll turn it over to you for any questions or comments. Commissioner Burke?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm kind of new to this, so are folks living there now?
Yes.
So what's the plan?
Yeah, so it's a 100-unit senior apartment community. With the rehabilitations that we'll have, usually what we try to accomplish, if there's a vacant unit, you just move the tenant to that vacant unit, then rehab the one they moved out of, and just kind of shift people around. There should be no need for long-term relocation for any of the tenants. Even if there's a full-scale, rehab of the kitchen and bath that takes place, we can accommodate the existing tenants and just kind of shift them between units and really rehabilitate the entire property using that method.
Anything else? I think last time I was delivering, with senior meals, delivering meals to there, and I wanted to say there was 80 some units occupied.
Yeah.
This sound about right?
It's probably higher than that now.
Okay.
It's I would say in the upper 90s as far as percentage of occupancy.
So you can still move
Yeah,
around to the.
we'll have a vacant unit. There's talk about actually adding a unit. If we do that, that would make that even easier. But as of right now, our full, rehab plan hasn't been set yet. We rely on third-party consultants to help us determine that, and that work's still in process.
Okay, good, thank you. Commissioners, DeShane, Chase, good. Coming to my right.
Just some quick thoughts.
No, go ahead.
I think it's interesting, the decision to expand the eligibility of the property. Do you have like long-term plans to?
When you say expand the eligibility.
Yeah, well, just beyond the senior population too.
When he mentioned that, I think he was talking about
For our community
in
versus
general,
your
not for
property.
this property. This property is actually
Okay.
required to stay senior.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful.
We don't
to
have
me.
any, influence over that.
Yep, yep. The 4% stuff, I think that makes all the sense in the world. The term, I think, makes sense as long as it aligns with the funding piece for you. As a general note, just pilots typically make a lot of sense for developers to provide some certainty is what we're told at the state level. And I know there's talk of expanding pilots to affordable housing projects, and that legislation's moving at this point. So just to the note that we should take a serious look at making sure that we have the way that we're going to consider those items in line at the city, should that opportunity arise for us.
Sure.
Yep.
And that'll come to ordinance at
Yep.
codify.
Yeah. But yeah, generally, I think this is good stuff, and I'm happy to be supportive.
Okay. I had one question, and it was on the residents that you have there are all under that affordable housing, that there's, so probably 100% of your residents
Yes.
there are subsidized.
Yes, it's currently, it was been restricted at least since, I really think it was since it was constructed in the early 80s. The last full-scale rehab was approximately 15 years ago. The way that the cycle for the tax credits works, really every 15 years you can take advantage of that credit again, recapitalize the property. So this is really its next step in its life cycle to do this. So those restrictions have been in place really since the 80s. So those are going to stay the same. Income limits aren't going to change. So, and it is 100% restricted.
All right, I'm comfortable, and I've become familiar with the product and the previous management company. I'm happy to see you. Welcome to Walker.
Yeah.
And
To be clear, actually, the third-party management company that the seller uses is ours as well. So management is actually, we're going to have continuity from that standpoint as
oh,
well.
fantastic. Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, so smooth for the residents.
Yes.
There's, I think we all see them. We were just discussing earlier about walkways across Remembrance Road right in front, and those residents help. I believe we help support them with the businesses that locate in that area, but then they help support those businesses by, stay open by utilizing them. So I think everybody wins out of that. Commissioners, any other dialogue or questions, even for Mr. Stefanko or Mr. Eberly? All right, seeing none, I see said favorable nods. We're good for a motion here at this point then. I'll entertain a motion for approval and support for our extension of the pilot agreement. I want to make sure I word this properly. Our current pilot agreement the fees would remain at 4%, not to split those. They'll stay at the static for where we're at now. So really this is an extension for another 38 years on the pilot, if you will.
Mayor, we're proposing a brand new ordinance.
Okay.
It's just a lot cleaner than the old one. So if the motion could be to formalize the first reading of the ordinance as amended.
Correct, because we're updating, thank you. Good
Correct.
call. So Chapter 78, Article 3.
Right, and this ordinance will replace the
That.
existing one.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good clarification, thank you.
Motion.
Mr. Gilbert, do we have support?
Support?
Any other discussion on ordinance 21-664 in the first reading? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, first reading of ordinance 21-664 is passed. Thank you both for coming. Mr. Stefanko, thank you again for coming from DeWitt. Don't feel obligated to stay. You've got a little drive ahead of you, so.
Mayor, if I can quickly.
Yes.
When do you think for second reading we're looking at timeline-wise?
I think it's going to depend on how fast MISTA approves it.
Not fast.
There is some language in there that I anticipate MISTA having some objection to, that we might have to go around in circles with them a little bit on. Mr. Stefanko, do you have any idea how long it might take to get MISTA to respond?
I have a pretty good relationship with their in-house attorneys. I don't know if you've been dealing with them at all, but it's Margaret Myers
Oh, yeah.
who handles those, and I can get her attention pretty quickly.
So I know that's not really it's a very lawyerly answer.
And we'd expect nothing less
Yeah,
with the two of
I
you
do what I
standing
can,
right
Mayor.
there.
I do what I can.
And I think probably not go forward unless the commission feels differently, to save Mr. Stefanko the trip over from DeWitt. If the two of you, sounds like there's communication there. If you're communicating with Councilor Eberly, then I think we're fine. Saves you the trip from coming over. If you feel there's a need to come, by all means, let's have him. But I think we're in a good spot on this. Cool. All right, we are good there. And seeing how our public is leaving, there's no public comment. So we'll turn it over to Commissioner City Manager comments. I will go to our right this time to our clerk.
Okay, the big announcement the clerk's office has is we have a March 1st election. We will be a huge time crunch because normal election is 3-month process before the start of any election date. And then with that said, the Bureau of Elections was not prepared. They planned on a January 15 rollout of a new enhancement to our election database. And now that we have a March 1st election, they have to fast track that enhancement because we can't issue a label for the election. So right now, we might not be mailing out applications until January 3rd. Ballots should have went out January 15. At the earliest, they'll go out January 20th, which is the deadline for them to go out. So we will be in a huge time crunch in January and February.
Thank you in advance
That's my
for all that
big
you
news.
do. All right, Commissioner Gilbert.
Ordinance met before this to talk small cell. I think we're pretty much boxed in on what we're approving, so that should be coming to the Planning Commission and then City Commission in due time. And then the Planning Commission did approve the come and go gas station convenience store right in front of my house. So that is something I will be looking forward to in terms of convenience.
Those are really cool stores.
Yeah.
They've got that Midwest feel to them.
Well,
with the
it sounds like
amenities.
this is one of their first in this market, like in Michigan. So
I think it is the
yeah.
first.
So it'll be interesting to see how it looks and how it plays, and it's going to get a lot of attention from their corporate offices and things like that. So looking forward to that, and that's all I have for you.
And for those that aren't aware, they are based out of Des Moines, Iowa, and just they're kind of a staple in a few other states around us. So anyway, yeah, I'm excited to have them come. Commissioner Glanville.
Yeah, I think the only thing that happened last week was attending the Christmas party, so that was nice. It was nice to have everybody together and get some of those recognitions out. So yeah, it was a nice celebration.
Thank you. Commissioner Groders.
Yes, I appreciate the attention to the Maple Row sidewalks. I think that's gonna be a real, I know those folks have been in communication with us anyway, but I think it will help at least for them to know that we're prioritizing it and that we're very much aware of their situation and the needs that go on there. And I just wanted to comment on Dan's work with the MIDC. That is, you have no idea how incredibly complicated that is, and he did a really fabulous job explaining it and handling all the requirements that go into that.
There's a lot.
So it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. So, yes, so thank you for handling that very well.
Cool. Thank you. Commissioner Chase.
We had a successful wreath contest this year. The winners have been announced on Facebook, and then again, it was great to be at the staff Christmas party last week, Thursday.
Thank you. Commissioner DeShane, welcome back.
Thank you. I too thought that the engineering department did a good job on the sidewalk presentation, as well as Dan. That MIDC is very taxing project, and you're correct, he did a very nice job in explaining it, because you can get really lost in the woods on that one. We need to get Carol putting us back on the trail.
Nice one.
And a Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you. Commissioner Burke.
I really did appreciate the sidewalks, and I agreed with a lot of comments about, prioritizing Maple Row and the things that are in front of us in conjunction with the new projects we're working on, but also not forgetting about the past. So I still like Ferris Street, for example, as one. I think the Leonard project is very good, which we talked about, I think, last year. Anything that's got money that's coming from somewhere else tied to it is certainly very attractive. Sure. So I thought that was all very good. Happy holidays. Thanks.
Thank you. Assistant City Manager.
I'll be meeting tomorrow morning with our attorney regarding the billboard lawsuit, and we're going to try to frame up a settlement. And obviously, you folks will be involved in any part of settlement that reaches any kind of a discussion phase.
And this goes back a number of years.
Well, this one, we're going to try to tie back without going into too much detail.
Okay, sure.
2011, we put in we reached a settlement with I forget the name, it was either CBS Outdoor or one of the other outdoor groups. The two-sided electronic billboard that is next to the Grand River at the intersection of I-96 and 131, you probably don't even register it. That was the settlement, and at that time, there was a variety of billboards that were proposed, and we reached that one because the traffic counts are the highest in that location. And it is in the city of Walker, believe it or not, because it's on the west side of the river. We're going to try to box in a settlement that essentially duplicates that 2011 settlement. Standards, size, display, those kind of things. But we're meeting at 10 o'clock tomorrow with our MML attorney to go over that, so you'll obviously be apprised of that. And the other prong in that issue is we met with Jeff Sluggett, and we're starting the sign ordinance revision process. So look for that after the first of the year as the first item in our zoning ordinance rewrite. And that is enough. Merry Christmas. See you next year.
Great, thank you. City Manager.
Just a couple of comments. Again, just want to thank, as you guys have, Scott and Travis for their presentation. As you know, they take that stuff pretty passionately, and I know they appreciate you ranking these projects because, as you can see, they're very successful when they go get competitive grants with the Metro Council. So it helps having that list, and they can pick that off, and as evidenced by Scott getting that, obtaining the grant for Bristol. That's because we've talked about that for years. We knew it was a high priority, and it was the second highest ranked project at the Metro Council. So good work for all of you for chiming in on this. That really helps make his job easier and our job easier as we go for these grants. So thanks for that. Thanks for those who were able to attend the recognition happy hour last week. I know our staff appreciates it. It's pretty low key this year, but it was still nice to see everybody there, and I think they liked the format and appreciated it. And other than that, happy holidays.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I just had to look at my phone for my calendar a minute ago because it's been a quick week here with things. But really, the big thing was the staff, our little Christmas get together, the happy hour, if you will. You think Tammy, 35 years. I mean, there was 450 years worth of service to the employees. Is pretty cool. So those able to make it, thank you. Those that couldn't, understood, and I think it just sends a real strong message to our staff. As I'd shared in the comments, they said that they have choices of where they want to go to work each day, as we all do, and the fact that they continue to make the choice here is pretty special. So that being said, again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment and support.
So moved.
Mr. Gilbert, thank you.
Support.